Okay, everybody, I think we've got a good number of people, so we'll just get started. So hello and welcome to the webinar today. I hope you all had a good weekend and are doing well in these unusual times. I'm glad that we were still able to put together an event like this, and also glad to see so many people join us today. My name is David Stevenson. I work on the help desk at Europe PMC, and I'll be giving a brief introduction before handing over to colleagues. Firstly, a bit of housekeeping. As you may have seen on the previous slide, all mics, apart from the speaker, will be muted during the presentation. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box. We'll answer those when possible, and we'll do a recap at the end of the webinar as well. So today's webinar is aimed at keeping you informed of some of the recent developments over the past 12 months in Europe PMC. Speaking today will be Michelle Hyde-Smith, who's Service Coordinator. We also have Diane Araújo, who's Technical Outreach Officer, Christine Ferguson, who's Information Scientist and works on comms and the Help Desk. We also have Fran Rogers, who's also Customer Support Specialist, who works on Help Desk, and myself, David Stevenson, and I work on the Help Desk as well. So we have the topics today being covered will be the funder dashboard by Michelle, and she'll talk about how you can get the most out of it. We'll also be going through preprints, which we have recently started indexing. We'll also talk about the manuscript submission system, which has underwent a few changes over the past year. Diane will talk about new website features following on from our recent redesign of the site. And at the end, we'll go on to questions. So as I said, the speaker won't see your questions as they're talking, but we'll answer those in the chat box. And there'll be time at the end to ask some more questions, and we'll recap any questions that have come in. If we do run out of time, we'll get back to anyone who's asked a question after the webinar. So before we begin in earnest, I'll give a brief overview of Europe PMC. So Europe PMC is an open database of life sciences literature. We contain abstracts from various sources, primarily PubMed, with whom we have a close relationship. We have expanded recently to index preprints from various different providers, and we have roughly 34 million abstracts, 5 million full text items, and these can be from the publisher themselves or have been uploaded via authors. And there are also an additional 2.7 million links through to full text via our integration with Unpaywall. And as well as being a platform for publications, we also aim to enrich this content and add value through a range of extra services and integrations. So we have 500 million citation network connections via an open citation dataset. We have 100 million database crosslinks to content in 20 databases such as BioStudies, Protein Databank, and Altmetrics. We also have 1 billion text-mined annotations and an integration with ORCID, where we now have 1.2 million ORCID IDs linked to 8 billion articles. When we also have a searchable database containing 75,000 grants, which come from you, the funders, and can be linked to publications. You might hear us refer to this database as GRIST. And to put Europe PMC into context, we operate out of Emble EBI in Kingston, at least we did a couple of months ago. And as I've touched upon, we work closely with PubMed and PMC. We provide our services for and thanks to all of you, which includes our two latest funders, NQ Transforming Mental Health and Pancreatic Cancer UK, which brings us to 31 funders in total. We leverage all of the data we have and the infrastructure to provide some funder-specific services, such as the funder dashboard Michelle will talk about, and our manuscript submission system, Europe PMC Plus, and this allows authors to submit full text of articles based on your open access policies, and then link these papers to grants in our GRIST database. Fran will talk more about this later. So that was quite a brief overview, and we'll now move on to our first speaker, who is Michelle.
Okay, I hope everybody can hear me. My name's Michelle Hyde-Smith. I'm a service coordinator for Europe PMC, and I'm going to talk to you about the funder dashboard, which we developed in the last year, specifically for Europe PMC funders. So a little bit of background. Funders may have two requirements which Europe PMC can help with. One of those is checking compliance with your open access policies of your grantees. And the other is assessing the impact of the research outputs that they produce. And as I'm sure you're all very aware, to comply with your open access policies, grantee articles should be available as full text in Europe PMC, usually within 6 months of publication. So when we started this project, we did a survey with some of the funders just to find out a little bit about their current processes for checking compliance. Several of the funders said they do check compliance, but some of them, particularly the smaller funders, said that they didn't have time to check compliance with open access policy. And of those who do check compliance, some of them were doing it annually, and some of the bigger funders were doing it more frequently. And in terms of the kind of challenges that people face, the key one obviously was lack of time and resources. But also some said it was hard to find out if the article was open access, and also the difficulty of not knowing when articles have indeed been published. And then the final point, one funder mentioned that it's a challenge when authors don't acknowledge funders. And on that point, we actually did a text mining project where we aimed to increase the number of article funder links that we had in Europe PMC by looking for acknowledgements of the funder in the full text. So the funder dashboard, you can find that from the funder page. So if you go to europepmc.org and you go to the About section, in the About section there's a funder page, and each funder will have a link to the dashboard. Just to say, the dashboards are built from Europe PMC APIs, so all of the data is freely available in Europe PMC, and it can also be retrieved and exported using the advanced search in Europe PMC. So I thought the easiest way to show you this was actually to do a live demonstration. So hopefully this link's going to work. But before we head to the live page, I just wanted to show you that in the link, you'll see a funder name and a date range. So what this means is that you can actually copy the URL in your browser window and send it to a colleague, and they can access the same report that you're referring to. Okay, so I might just have to switch my screen. So if you could just hold on 2 seconds. Okay, so I hope now you can all see the dashboard loaded in my browser window. So the first thing that I wanted to show you was that you can choose the funder from this drop-down menu on the top right. So all of the Europe PMC funders are listed in that drop-down. Secondly, you'll notice that the dashboard has 2 tabs, one for open access and one for impact, and we'll look at both of those in detail in a moment. The next thing to point out is the date range, or the date picker here. So you can set a date range for the dashboard. Just click into the field, and we've got some defaults like last year, last month, or you can select a specific month and year. Okay, so right at the top, I've actually chosen the last 4 years for this report, and right at the top you can see summary here. So we have, these are all the articles that Cancer Research UK has in Europe PMC. These are 3,039 only have an abstract in Europe PMC, 6,765 have full text, and 4,743 are open access. So this immediately gives you an idea with the percentages underneath of what percentage of articles linked to you as a funder in Europe PMC are open access. And so down below, you can actually see the breakdown of that over the last few years. And if you hover over each of the bars for a particular year, you can see exactly how many articles there are open access, full text or abstract only. So moving down, we now have a chart which shows you which articles have linked data. So within Europe PMC, we link to supplemental files from articles, and we also text mine the full text of articles to find references to data sets within the full text, and these are called data accessions. So any articles that actually have linked data, we show you how many each year have linked data as opposed to how many do not have linked data. And this may be of interest to you, particularly if you are starting to introduce data management plans more rigorously. So there we have the compliance tab. I'm going to scroll back up and we'll go into the impact tab now. So you'll notice that the date range stays the same. That carries across from one tab to the other, but you can obviously easily change it by clicking into it. So firstly, on this tab, we've got annual citations. Now, this is the number of citations received by articles you've funded in Europe PMC for a particular year. So this is, for example, in 2018, articles that you funded were cited 133,537 times. So obviously, the citation count will be much lower in recent years because it takes a little while to catch up year by year. Next, we have a couple of pie charts here. So what this one is showing you is out of all the articles in Europe PMC, the articles that are linked to an ORCID is around 52%, and articles that are not linked to an author's ORCID, so an ORCID is the unique author ID, is around 47%. And now you can see how cancer research articles compare to that. So actually a very high percentage here of the cancer research articles in Europe PMC are linked to at least one author ORCID. And I should mention here that this is not necessarily the ORCID of the PI. It could be a corresponding author, but nevertheless, it's positive to see that the take-up of ORCID is quite high for this particular funder's articles. And then down at the bottom here, we have how many articles are based on a preprint. So preprints, Chris Ferguson will talk about a bit later. They are becoming increasingly popular, especially at the current time with the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic. And what this shows you, although we don't have funder information for preprints themselves, what we can do in Europe PMC is we can link preprints to final published articles. And so this is showing you that, for example, in 2019, 160 articles that were published were based on a preprint. So I hope that will be useful to you. And I will have a look at the chat window when I'm finished and answer any questions that you've put in the chat window. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Christine Ferguson and I work as an information specialist on Europe PMC's help desk and communications team. So today I'm going to talk about recent work we've been doing on including preprints content in Europe PMC. Let me start with a few definitions. A preprint is what we classify as a research article that is posted before completion of formal peer review and publication by a journal. It may have undergone some basic screening, for example, for technical completeness, and to check that there's no obvious biosecurity threats, for example. It's used to rapidly disseminate results which is especially useful during natural disasters. So when science needs to form the basis of management strategies for a pandemic or outbreak of wildfires or something like that. It's growing in popularity, and the preprint community is actively supported by major life science funders. So on Europe PMC, we went live in July 2018, and we currently index 133,000 preprints. So Europe PMC currently indexes biomedical preprints from the following 9 preprint servers. What you can see here is Research Square, which is a platform serving the Nature Publishing Group journals. Preprints from Research Square were added very recently and made available as of April 2020. The open research publishing platforms are powered by the Faculty of 1000, and these include platforms like Welcome Open Research and 6 other open research platforms. Chem Archive and the Bellstein Archives focus on chemistry-related research. Here, I've got a graph showing you the growth in numbers of preprints we're indexing, and the proportions from various servers are shown with different colors within each bar. So what I wanted to show you here is that the overall numbers are increasing year on year. And up until 2019, bioRxiv, which is shown in tan here, was the greatest source of biomedical preprints for Europe PMC. The proportions from newer servers such as Research Square, shown in yellow, and Chem Archive, shown in blue, are increasing over time, and others are decreasing over time. So, for example, preprints.org numbers are decreasing. I'd like to show you what a preprint looks like in Europe PMC and the kinds of information that we include. So I'm going to show you 8 features on this slide. Firstly, when a preprint comes in, what we do is assign a preprint identifier to it, and you can see it here, PPR 7677. So this is a preprint from bioRxiv, a typical preprint. The next 2 features are really banners to designate that this is a preprint, so to make clear to users that they are viewing a preprint. There's a little green banner that appears with the word preprint, and the tan banner indicates whether there is a peer-reviewed version of the article available, and also contains a hyperlink so that you can click through to it. We link out to the full text where it's available, and if a free version is available, a legally free version, we can link out to it via Unpaywall. So beyond this, the features I'll show you beyond this are the pieces of information that we layer on top. So it's value added by Europe PMC. So firstly, we link to citations of the articles over time and impact, and this is shown by Altmetrics and Cite AI. And Diane, you'll show this in more detail a bit later on. We link to reviews of preprints from contributors such as Peer Community In, Prelights and Publons. And we link to TextMine terms. So these are scientific terms that we call SciLite annotations, and they include things like gene names, chemical entities that help a reader determine the usefulness of an article that comes up in a search. And finally, the ORCID functionality. So as you can see, the author list is over here, and E. Monroe has claimed this, has linked this preprint to their ORCID profile, and any author can do this via the Claim to ORCID button on the right. But if we have a look at E. Monroe, clicking on the author's name will provide a drop-down menu, and you can see the feature I want to show you is the author profile. So clicking on that, selecting that functionality will take you to an author profile page. And what you'll see on the y-axis is the publications each year, and on the x-axis, the years. And what I'd like to show you here is that each article type, whether it's an abstract or free text article or a preprint, is shown here using a different color. The preprints are featured here in light blue, and the black line is the citations per year from all of those publications submitted by an author. So one feature that seems to be particularly unique to preprints is versioning. It's pretty prevalent in the preprint world. While we see versioning of preprints oftentimes going up to 3, sometimes preprints are added to Europe PMC with up to 10 versions, which would mean 10 individual search results if we didn't do something to deal with these versions. So what we've decided to do is link and offer a collapsed aggregate to users. I'd just like to demonstrate this feature a little. So if we were to search for an article on MCE3R, stress resistance, what you would come up with is a list of articles, and you can see 2 preprints here, one which has 3 versions and one which just has 1. And clicking or selecting the first that has 3 versions will take you to the preprint page, where you can see a preprint version history with all 3 versions and hyperlinks to those versions, so that you can click between them and see any changes that have occurred within each version. This transparency into versioning really helps, we think, with trustworthiness of the preprints and also discoverability. So in this example here, I'm showing you the preprint, a bioarchive preprint, and its final published version in Nature Communications. And what you can see is that each has different numbers of citations, and also you can link between them directly. So if we were to select the preprint indexed there, what it would take you to is the preprint page with that tan banner I mentioned previously, with a hyperlink to the final peer-reviewed version of the article. And clicking on the hyperlink takes you directly through to that page. So we're beginning to be able to answer questions that we've had from the start with all of this functionality, such as, are preprints cited often? Yes. Do authors cite their own preprints? Most definitely. Do authors claim preprints to their ORCID profiles? Yes, they do. Where do preprints end up publishing? We can answer those questions. And how long does it take for a preprint to be published? What we don't yet have is the full text XML for preprints. We only index the abstracts, but we're busy working or embarking on a project to index the full text of preprints. And when we have that in place, we'll be able to answer questions like, how does the preprint differ from the final published version? One last thing I'd like to point out is the issue around preprint standards and ethics. What we've observed since we initiated this preprint indexing project is that there's a real wild west of policies out there concerning withdrawal, retraction, and deletion of preprints. In fact, policies are almost non-existent, we would say, unlike traditional journals where an article is published and corrections and retractions are issued. In those cases, the original journal article is retained, but there's very little practice in the world of preprints around this. So what we routinely see is preprint providers deleting preprints from their sites, not realizing that the DOI and cross-ref metadata can't be deleted so readily. So what we want to see is better standards that share the fact that once a DOI is minted, it remains in perpetuity and should always resolve somewhere. We also have problems with metadata standards differing across preprint servers and a variety of approaches from different servers as to how they indicate different versions of preprints and whether they encourage data availability. So this has been recognized as a problem within the preprint community, and given our oversight of these practices, we were fortunate enough to help organize a workshop earlier this year with ASAP Bio, and they're a body that promotes transparency and reproducibility of research as well as preprints. And together with ASAP Bio, we joined with publishers and preprint server staff to work on a roadmap for transparent and fair principles in preprints for biology and medicine. This meeting has resulted in a series of working groups who are putting together recommendations for the preprint community on these different topics. I'd like to end there now. So thank you for listening, and I'd be happy to try and answer questions in the chat box.
Hello everybody, I'm Fran Rogers and I work on the help desk. And today I will be discussing the development and features of our updated manuscript submission system, Europe PMC Plus. So this is the system that grantees submit their usually author accepted manuscripts to when they are using the green open access route, or when journals do not submit full text to PubMed Central directly. So why did we need a new system? So the original submission system was very old and had been made and maintained by the NCBI. So the NCBI were retiring the system and building a new one, and this meant that they would stop supporting the old system completely. We decided to take advantage of this and make our own system by using the developers on our team to have more control over the functionality and design. So to build the new system, we worked with the Coko Foundation. We chose to work with them as they were creating an open source framework for a variety of publishing needs. There's also a community of developers involved with the foundation, and they're used by different companies, for example, Hindawi, eLife and Digital Science. We also wanted to give back to the coder community and shared our developments so others could use and build on them. The main advantage of building from the ground up is that our developers now know the code inside and out, and they're able to make changes very quickly. So although the NCBI were very helpful with us setting it up, the previous system was sometimes a black box as far as we were concerned, and sometimes this could be problematic for our developers. Of course, we also wanted to make sure that the new system was as friendly and easy to use for users as possible. And we were aware that the old system sometimes proved confusing. And we want to make the submission process as pain-free as possible. So we carried out some user research to make sure the system would be as easy to use as possible. And we also knew that part of the problem was there was a lot of page clutter on the old system, which made it confusing for people to know where to click. And we generally wanted to give them a more guided path through the submission process, and also give them a more modern design that people would hopefully feel more comfortable with. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but one of the previous pain points in the old system was logging in. As what we used to do was help desk would create accounts for grantees and give them a system generated username and password. As these accounts were generated when funders gave us the grant information at the start of a grant, sometimes people wouldn't need to use them until several years later. They'd have generally forgotten the information, and because it was computer generated, it wasn't anything that they'd usually use, so all their usual logins wouldn't work. It was also extremely easy for users to create duplicate accounts and then be concerned when they couldn't see all their submissions because they'd got several accounts on the go. So in the new system, we've removed the need for help desk to make accounts. The username has been changed to the user's email address, and the system only allows one account per email address. And so hopefully when it's all that information, it'll be easy to remember for the grantees. So this is a screenshot of the first page when you go to submit a manuscript. We wanted to improve the navigation by giving a clearer representation of where users are and where they need to go within the submission. We tried to keep it to one task at a time. And to the right-hand side, we had help pages. So this is information that's relevant to the task that the user is doing at the time, and this will change as they move through the submission. So just to compare that to the old system, as you can see, there was a lot more text, there's a lot more going on, it's quite busy and could be quite overwhelming, especially if this was the first time you were using it. And as you can see, the help was pop-ups, which you needed to click on the little question marks to get up. And this wasn't necessarily relevant to the task you were on. It was all quite generic, and you just have lots of question marks to click on in some pages. So hopefully that's a lot easier for people to understand. We also took this opportunity to redesign our user guide. So we've tried to make this as clear as possible for users, and they can also access this via links at both the top and the bottom of the page. So if they're panicking, they can easily reach it. We also took the opportunity to create some short video tutorials. So these are really nice to just help users quickly see exactly what it's going to look like in the system and how to complete a submission. We've also done videos on reviewing a manuscript submitted by somebody else on their behalf, how to check the manuscript's status, and reporting any errors after a submission has been completed. So hopefully this is quite a nice page for you to direct you grantees to if you do get questions on how to use a submission system. So one of the tasks that the submission system handles is reporting errors. So once we have converted the files, we want to double check that no errors have been introduced by the conversion process, and especially in the case of author accepted manuscripts, that any scientifically important errors are caught if there's been some discussion between the author and the journal in between times. So this new system allows users to view the files side by side on the one web page, so it's all very easy for them to check for the errors. Before, that was definitely quite hard. And we've also improved the error reporting, so now it's very easy for users. They just highlight and then type in the change, whereas before they'd have to write in the paragraph number, and so it's all a lot easier for them, hopefully. Also, this is more an improvement of the help desk, but also for you. So in the old grants process, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of this, but we used to get the grants from the funders and then update that information into the GRIST database and grant finder. But as Old Plus predated GRIST, it wasn't able to use that information in the form that GRIST gave it. So we also had another database called the Login Admin database, which was specifically just to get grant data to Plus. And this was actually sometimes a bit tricky. And again, because it was an NCBI thing, we didn't always know why it was upset with information. So now we've got rid of that database. So it's all a beautiful streamlined system of your files, either in Excel or XML, to us, to GRIST and the grant finder, and then Plus uses the API of the grants. So it's all now beautiful. So just to recap on the advantages, it's easier to navigate, so hopefully fewer queries to you and us. It's easier to update and maintain the system on a developer level. We've updated the user guide, so hopefully you get less queries. It's easier to spot and report errors, and we've streamlined the grants process. And it's also hopefully a lot easier on the eye. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Diane Araújo, and today I will show you the main changes in the Europe PMC website. The Europe PMC offers an intuitive search for articles and preprints, easy access to full text, figures, and data, articles linked to data, protocols, reviews, and more. I will start showing how Europe PMC makes the search more intuitive. This is the Europe PMC search results. And on the left-hand side of the page, you will find the search filters where you can select the type of publications of your interest, the availability of full text, and the data filters. The type filters offer the option to select only for articles presenting the results of experimental research in like research articles, or only reviews, which will be labeled in yellow. Additionally, users can use the filter option to get only preprints. Preprints will be labeled in a green label. You can also filter your search according to access options. For example, you might want to return results only when the full text article is available for reading rather than just the abstract. For that, you can use the filter option free to read. That means the article is free to read but not to reuse, or you can use the filter option free to read and reuse. That these are the open access subset of free to read articles, and they are free to read, use, modify, and share. You find the free to read and free to read and use options labeled in blue. Notice that the different labels help you to intuitively identify the type of publication and access options. So the other type of filters is the date filter. You can use this filter to limit the publication date range to the latest year. So you can also set a custom date range if you wanted to include publications within a specific period, say last 2 or 5 years. Another way to look at the most recent research is to apply different sort orders. The new Europe PMC offers a drop-down menu for sorting results, where you can sort your results by date received, relevance, date published, and time cited. The sorting by date received is the default sorting option, and it will return results with articles that are new in Europe PMC at the top of the search results. However, you may be interested in date order, especially for searches where you run frequently, so you can view the most recently published records or drop down to alternatively view the records in ascending date order. The article page in Europe PMC also has changed to offer easy access to full text. Users can now have abstract and full text combined on the same page. Additionally, users can easily navigate through different article sections using the free full text menu on the left-hand side of the page, and have figures in their fingertips. As you can see here, users can now find the figures directly in the main article page and easily navigate through figures, and have also the option to see them in the context with the full text. Europe PMC redesign also brought changes on linked data display, dividing them into sections. Before coming to data, I would like to show the citation and impact section, where users can check the number of articles citing a specific publication and the number of data citation and more. Additionally, users can check alternative metrics such as autometrics, and also check for smart citations, which says if an article has been only mentioned, supported, or contradicted. The linked content is now sorted into sections. So the data section displays links to supporting and related data from nearly 50 life sciences databases. And also to protocols and materials, and reviews and recommendations. The new design also made it easier to find similar articles, and brought a section that displays the funders who supported a given work. The newest feature released on the article page was the ORCID claiming button, which allows users to claim their articles directly from the article page. We would like to thank all the 31 funders for making Europe PMC their repository of choice. We will now reply to your questions, and for any further questions, please contact the help desk at europemc.org. Also follow us on Twitter.
That's great. Thanks, Diane. And perhaps if you could unmute Michelle as well. Yep, that looks like that's been done. Yeah, so thank you everybody for your questions. It's good to see so many come in. Well, I know all of them seem to have been answered, but I'll go through a few now just so we've got them on the recording as well. So let me see. So there was a question from Robert Terry about how to clarify how attribution to a funder is measured. And I'll just answer this one quickly based on Michelle's reply. So we've got various sources for linking funding to publications. We use our grant database GRIST. We take in data from PubMed and PMC, and we also get grant links from ResearchFish as well. And we had a project recently where we did text mining on papers to link to grants in our grants database if they were referenced in a journal paper. So that's how we got those ones in. There's a question from Inessa Thompson about OA monitoring, about how AMs are linked to published articles in subscription journals. So we use the manuscript submission system for that. So you submit your manuscript there and link it through to the grant. And if the published version comes from PMC, that will be the main full text of that paper, so the open access version of that one there. Sanjay asked a question about how we disassociate from the publication links if they're incorrect. And this does happen sometimes. There's a Marie Curie European Union scheme, as well as a Marie Curie funder for Europe PMC, and some funders' grants are quite similar. But all you need to do is just email us at helpdesk@Europe PMC, and we can de-link publications as well. Let me see what other question. There was a question about the dashboard for Michelle from James here, about open access compliance. So we want an explanation of the 3 different classifications: abstract, full article, and open access. I don't know if you can answer that one, Michelle.
Yeah, I've provided some example search queries that you can use in Europe PMC to find what we're finding in the funder dashboard. So one thing that came out of those questions was this whether or not the open access category is just articles that are open access or articles that were open access within the embargo. So it's actually just articles that were open access. If we wanted to show articles that were open access within that funder's specified embargo period, I need to check to see whether that's possible. I have a feeling when we get the full text from PMC, we may not have the embargo date anymore. I will double check, and we can always follow up with a clear answer to that question.
Great, that's good, Michelle. Thank you. Let me just go down a bit further. There was one here from Chandrima about funder information from preprints. And correct me if I'm wrong, Michelle, but I believe the answer was it can be derived if the preprint goes on to be published, and then the information comes that way.
Yeah. So preprints themselves do not, or very, as far as I'm aware, do not contain funder information at this stage. So there's nothing in the metadata to tell us who funded that research. However, in Europe PMC, we do match preprints to final published articles. So we have an algorithm which checks the title of the article and some some author information. So if we find a match, we're able to link the preprint to the final published version in most cases, but not all. So it's not perfect. And hopefully over time this will improve as preprint metadata improves. But at the moment, we create those links so we can tell you how many published articles were based on a preprint and how many preprints have a published version, but we can't give you sort of a detailed breakdown of preprints linked to you as a funder. So there was also some questions from Rob about that, Rob Terry. And yeah, there's one specific query that he's asking for, which I will come back to after the webinar because it's a little bit hard to put that together at the moment on the spot.
Okay, that's fine. Let me check. There was one question from Alison McEwen about author profiles, including location and gender. So the response to that really was that the information in author profiles comes from ORCID. So ORCID does contain institution information, which is displayed, which can be a proxy for location, I suppose. But because ORCID doesn't display gender, then we don't get that information through and we don't display it either. Let me just check down. There's another question from Inessa about whether researchers are complying with immediate no embargo policies. Is there a feature to understand whether researchers are complying with immediate no embargo policies? And I think, looking at Michelle's response was that currently not on the dashboard, but we might have to do some digging to see whether it's possible.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we can look into that. So there was also a question about how, I think Geraldine asked how quickly preprints appear in Europe PMC after being posted on a preprint server. So Europe PMC gets the information, the metadata of preprints from Crossref metadata service. We get updates daily, but we don't know how quickly preprint servers push that information to Crossref. So it really depends on the individual preprint server. But I would imagine most of them have some kind of automated process set up. So I would imagine it's fairly quickly, and there may be a slight delay when something to get indexed in Europe PMC. But yeah, it's judging by the dates of some of the preprints that we get, I think it's fairly rapid actually, at least within a day or two.
Excellent. I'm just looking through to see if there's anything else. There was another question from Geraldine, which you've answered as well, Michelle, about compliance split by institution.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so currently in Europe PMC, we don't, unlike authors where we have the ORCID ID to uniquely identify an author, we don't have a similar thing for affiliation, so we can't easily uniquely identify an institute or a university. However, we have been working on a pilot project with RAW IDs, which are research organisation IDs. And what we've done so far with that is we've actually done a sort of proof of concept where we implemented raw IDs in Europe PMC, but only on articles where which are EMBL articles, where we absolutely knew that these articles are published by EMBL authors. What we've been looking into as our connected with a project that we were working on called Freya, or actually Chris has been working on very closely in the last year or two, which is all about persistent identifiers. And as part of a pilot project for that, we were also looking at how we could use text mining and machine learning to automatically identify and assign raw IDs for articles where we have affiliation information. And we have got some way with that, but it is really quite a complex area because affiliations are written in all sorts of different ways, and it is quite challenging and quite tricky to uniquely identify organisations. But that is something that we've done some investigation into and we'd like to do further work on.
Great, that sounds good, Michelle. I think we've answered every question in the chat box as far as we can. So unless there is anything else, I'll just say thank you everybody for attending. This is just a snapshot of some of the things we've been working on at Europe PMC and only a small part of what we do. If you do need any more information about Europe PMC or have any questions, you know, it might come to you later, drop us an email at helpdesk@europepmc.org, and we at the help desk will answer it, or it will get passed on to the relevant person at Europe PMC. And all the slides will get emailed to attendees as well. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you, everybody.